Welcome to my Unit 3 final project. I chose the multi-model option, and in this video essay, I'll be examining why fandoms love redemption arc and are always asking for their favorite villains to be redeemed, with our case study being Azula from Avatar The Last Airbender. So, um, Avatar is widely recognized as having the best written redemption arc of all time with the character Zuko. Over the course of 3 seasons, Zuko, with much difficulty, completely changed from an angry, closed mindful, vengeful teen seeking his father's approval to a kind, forgiving, and patient leader. The redemption arc is incredibly well written and beloved by fans. However, this has now led to a now 2 decade long discourse among fans that seem to never run out of fuel. Fans of Azula believe that she also deserves a redemption arc for reasons I'll get into later. First, let's get into some background. What is a redemption arc? Traditionally in media, a villain is evil for selfish motivations of power, greed, or glory, and their story either ends in punishment or consequence equal to their actions. Redemption arcs flip the script, and instead of being punished for their actions, they are given a second chance to change for the better. A classic example of this would be Ebenezer Scrooge, who saw the error of his ways and transformed from being a cynic to an optimist. The point is to grow and change a once misguided character into one who sees the error of their ways and atone for their previous actions. This works for characters like Zuko because his redemption arc was a central part of the Avatar story. He was given 3 seasons to grow and change the ideology. Our case study revolves around Azula, the Fire Princess herself, and the primary antagonist of Avatar. Just like Zuko, she was raised under the same ideology, one centered on power, control, and earning their father's approval. But despite those shared conditions, they end up on completely different paths. Zuko gives up his power and status completely to be better, and Azula fully exercises her power and control she has over other people to get the things she desires. Some commenters argue that it's unfair to Azula that she was never given a proper role model to follow, so she never had the option to change her ways. Zuko had his mother early in his life, and his uncle Iroh to thank for the path he ended up choosing. Commenters also argue that it's not right that she didn't get a chance to redeem herself because of her age. Azula is only 14 years old when the show takes place, an extremely impressionable age in which she doesn't have complete autonomy of her actions. Her worldview isn't fully developed, and most of her actions are driven by a need for approval rather than malice. She was essentially groomed to be a weapon by her father, Ozai. From a young age, she learned that love was conditional and tied to perfection. She witnessed what happened when someone stepped out of line, and specifically when Zuko was scarred and exiled for speaking out of turn at a war general meeting. All these reasons point to a conclusion that Azula never had the option to be good, and in the case of nature versus nurture, she's a product of her environment. The counter believes that there are limits to what characters can when characters can or can't be redeemed. Azula did some pretty terrible things in the name of her father. Some instances include trying to kill Aang while in the Avatar state to end the Avatar cycle, attempting to take Ba Sing Se, a city full of refugees, and masterminding the plan to burn the Earth Kingdom to the ground. These acts affect the lives of hundreds of thousands of people, forcing them out of their homes, destroying their land. It gets to a point where the actions taken are just too violent and can't be atoned for. It also weakens the overall narrative and Avatar's integrity of storytelling. A huge part of Avatar is balance, yin yang. Azula and Zuko are foils to one another. Where Azula is a ruthless, practical prodigy, Zuko is empathetic, emotional, and has to work much harder to reach the same level of bending as Azula. What does it say for the story when the character full of cruelty and pride ends up with a good ending? Her cruelty and rejection of her allies, once they don't fear her anymore, lead to her downfall, while Zuko's humility and kindness allow him to come up on top. It just doesn't work for her character. Azula shows no intention of remorse for her actions and instead swears revenge on her enemies by the end of the series. Having her switch up and suddenly want to change for the better would make zero sense given her characterization. Azula believes that forgiveness is weakness, so why would she search for it? Azula is an incredibly thought out and well written character, so it makes sense why fans would want a happy ending for her. But giving her a redemption arc would weaken the story because it would feel unearned and forced. And I feel it's important to mention that after 2 decades of fans vying for Azula to have a good ending, that the critics actually addressed it. In the comics that follow the series, they give her a comic of her own, in which she's given the option of redemption, and she outright rejects it. Exactly the thing that she would do. Now, I feel both arguments have good points, but they're not fully correct. Azula is young and impressionable, true, but accountability still needs to be taken. And she did terrible things. However, that doesn't mean she's not able to grow. Both of them see her as a one-sided character. One side only sees her for her past and innocence, and the other sees her as too evil to be capable of change. Azula is an incredibly complex and nuanced character. We can't just label her as plain evil or plain good. To get a full picture, we have to look at Azula for both her past and present self. Her past self and her present actions, excuse me. As Richard Holden expresses in his article, people or system to blame is human. The fix is to engineer. People are naturally inclined to focus on individual actions rather than systems that shape them. Azula is neither entirely evil or entirely redeemable. We must look at both her actions and the environment that conditioned those choices. Azula is more complex than simply being plain bad or plain good, and anyone is capable of growth even if it's not a full transformation. However, we should take into perspective that redemption arcs as a concept is inherently flawed and incredibly difficult to apply. It's not a decision that can be made on a whim after a fandom decides that the villain is likable enough to receive a redemption arc. It takes careful planning and commitment to a character's screen time to fully shell out a proper redemption arc. To be satisfying and convincing, it has to be earned with missteps along the way. As Raja Khan puts it in her article, Redemption Arcs in Literature Why We Love Redemption Quest Characters. In order to execute a redemption arc well, one needs to show that the character recognizing the wrong that they were excuse me. In order to execute a successful redemption arc well, one needs to show the character recognizing the wrongs that were committed in the past, as well as having some concrete plans set for how these mistakes will be rectified. As mentioned before, Azula holds zero intention to atone for her past mistakes and still holds the belief that her enemy should be destroyed. It's understandable why fans want to give a redemption arc to Azula because she's so well written, she's such a lovable character. However, what makes her a compelling character is that she is both a perpetrator of the system and a victim of it. But just because she's a victim doesn't mean that she needs or deserves a redemption arc to be a resolved character. I also want to mention that the concept of someone deserving to be good is inherently flawed because being a good person isn't a gift given, but rather an inner change that must be found on their own. Letting a person become good after being a horrible person for 3 seasons straight is just bad storytelling. I think it's good to point out that not every character needs to be redeemed. While it's an incredibly compelling storytelling device, it's extremely difficult to be done right. I want to use Discord as an example of what would happen to Azula if she were redeemed, given a whole separate series of how she could grow and change and become a better person. He starts out as a Lord of Chaos, completely flipping Equestria upside down for no reason other than his own enjoyment. He destroys this world. When he's defeated and turned back to stone, he's brought back to life 1 season later and given the chance to redeem himself. At first, he rejects it, but as he slowly inches forward and learns the warmth of friendship, he embraces it. And over the course of 4 seasons, he redeems himself. However, at some point, he hits a wall. The writers don't know what to do with his character. There's nothing else for him to do. He was a Lord of Chaos. All his magic does is create chaos. Now he's just a guy. He's just a Dracronicus. He doesn't do anything. His whole purpose is to create chaos and disruption. And now that he's good, he doesn't have much to do. I feel the same would be the case for Azula. If she received a redemption arc, her whole purpose as a character foil to bring destruction and show what the cruelty the Fire Nation really brings. When a character is that stout in a mold, it can be nearly impossible to break them out of it and find a reasonable ending for them. All we can hope for is Azula a little bit is that Azula gets a little bit of healing. Excuse me. but a complete reorientation of her values is just unrealistic. But why do fandoms love redemption arcs so much? Why do fandoms want to give their favorite villains an inherent out for their misdeeds? What makes redemption arcs so addicting and engaging to watch? It has to do with reflection of the human psyche and the optimistic outlook on people's moral consciousness. Everyone's heard of the girl who swears she can fix her toxic, manipulative, and emotionally unavailable boyfriend. Come on. This logic applies to fandoms that believe that their favorite flawed villain should be redeemed. Azula's inner turmoil inspires empathy and prompts us to wonder what it would take if it were possible for her to heal and to finally heal, despite the intensity of her conditioning and her extreme cruelty. Redemption arcs resonate with viewers because they reflect universal human experiences of guilt, moral failure, and the desire for transformation. They explore complex emotions like consciousness and forgiveness, creating strong emotional depth and moral ambiguity. Or, in other words, it's inspiring to see how it's inspiring how they show people can change. Redemption stories explore complex emotions like consciousness, forgiveness, and second chances that create a strong emotional depth and moral ambiguity. It's an incredibly engaging storytelling device that completely transforms and grows characters into changed people for the better, creating a captivating and entertaining experience for the viewer. So, in conclusion, a redemption arc isn't the resolution that all villains need. While it's a really cool storytelling device, it's so hard to do, and you need to know that you want to make your character redeemed from the beginning before you decide that they need a redemption arc. It must be planned much, much ahead. It can't be made on a whim. No one can deserve a redemption arc. It comes from within the character. If the character has no intention and their characterization does not allow them to want a redemption arc, then it just doesn't make sense to give them one. Although she had a troubled past, she doesn't deserve a redemption arc. She needs to decide that on her own. And that just doesn't work. That just doesn't work for Azul's character. And number three, characters aren't all good or all bad. Complex characters will have nuance. Azula isn't all good, but she also isn't all bad. She has moments of kindness. She has moments of humility, but she hasn't had the correct outlet to really let those show. Just completely characterizing in characters all evil or all good completely defeats the purpose of good character writing, which is that they reflect real human emotion and real human people. Here are my sources, and thank you for letting me ramble about my favorite show for 13 minutes.